Hello and welcome. I'm Tricia Stewart, Chair of the Board of Directors of the Bright Focus Foundation, and I am proud to represent the foundation along with my colleague, Dr. Tanya Matthews, as we celebrate World Alzheimer's Day and the public release of James Keach's film, Turning Point. Bright Focus is a nonprofit whose mission is to cure diseases of the mind and sight. We fund high-risk, high-return research and are a community of scientists, researchers, families, and caregivers.
Thank you, Tricia. As Tricia mentioned, I'm also a member of Bright Focus Foundation's board. I'm Associate Provost of Inclusive Workforce Development and Director of the STEM Innovation Learning Center at Wayne State University. I'm really excited to be part of relaunching Turning Point, a documentary that follows a team of dedicated scientists and the families they are serving as they progress through the difficult and personal search to find a cure for Alzheimer's disease. It explores some of the most complicated and gut-wrenching issues that face everyone involved, from the patients to the families, to the researchers, to the caretakers, and to the scientists as well.
Today, you will see clips from the movie and meet some of the Bright Focus funded scientists who are working towards a cure. The clips focus on three topics: clinical trials, the disproportionate toll on women and on minority and disadvantaged communities, and lastly, a look at where we are now and some hope for the future. Our goal, and that of the film, is to put a spotlight on the importance of research and clinical trials. The same is true of Alzheimer's, and a lot is happening in Alzheimer's research as well.
Well, let's kick off our conversation there, Tricia, because one of the things I was really fascinated by is going deeper into clinical trials. I mean, we're all hearing about them right now because we are using them for something that's personal to all of us, to COVID. But also, Alzheimer's is one of the most common and most debilitating issues that's facing our aging population. And I think clinical trials have gone from esoteric to very real. And I was struck by how long it takes to put on a clinical trial, and also how many volunteers we need for these trials. We're talking about thousands upon thousands of folks who've got to step up and agree to participate in these trials.
Right, you're absolutely right. It takes longer to get the participants than it actually takes to run the trial, to get enough participants so some fall out for a variety of reasons. And so you're absolutely right. The finding the audience and getting people involved.
Yes, you mentioned that it takes longer to recruit sometimes than it does to even do the study. And one of the reasons for that is also something we're facing with right now, which is recognition that historically, clinical trial participants have been overwhelmingly white and male, actually. There are some fantastic stories about clinical trials that were dedicated to finding cures to support women that had no women in the trials. And of course, we know that Alzheimer's disproportionately impacts women, and so we need more women in the clinical trials. Also, we've got stronger standards now around having clinical trial participants who are representative of the population that the drug or the cure must serve. So we need people of color, we need African Americans, we need Latinx, we need Native Americans, we need all of the members of our community to actually participate in order for the drug to be valid and to be safe across all of these different populations. You know, we the people could do quite a bit to accelerate the process as we get the word out and we step up to be participants in these studies ourselves. We can't ignore or miss sort of the devastating effects that this disease has on families and communities. And, you know, in some of the clips and of course in the full documentary, I was really struck by the story from one of the former heads at the FDA, right? She herself is a scientist. Her mother integrated Vassar College, right? This is an amazing woman who was smart and brilliant. To hear the story of sort of her mind fading away at the end. One of the things that really did define her as one of the most prized possessions that she had and cultivated. It is very difficult to watch, very, very difficult to lose.
Well, the other element to the diversity is the scientific side. And it's important to have the entire population participating in the clinical trials and providing the data that we need. But it's also important to have the scientists around the world with their perspective, their point of view playing into this. And at Bright Focus, as you know, we are currently funding over 100 research projects into Alzheimer's. They are global. They're not just all in the United States. We fund labs around the world, which means that we also have data from around the world.
I think that it is extraordinary when I think about the scope and breadth of the kinds of scientists we're able to help and support, from new career to mid-career to veteran career to Nobel Prize bound. But I also think that's really important. This is a complicated disease from which it's looking as if no one's necessarily immune. This is what happens to a population, a species that has learned to live to be 100 years old. I think that this documentary and the work of Bright Focus have really solidified that issue for me in a way that without experiencing both, I probably wouldn't have.
I don't want that jacket in there. Oh, you do it. He loves this jacket. It's like 100 years old.
It's a good one.
Yeah. I think you had that when we were dating.
Maybe so.
And that's like 41 years ago, right? Is that the jacket you wore when we did the, you went up in the balloon? Was that the jacket you wore, or was it black? All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. It was really gradual for us. I've always said Pat's been a little bit of a space cadet, so it was a little harder to notice, you know.
All right, which arm do you want me to borrow? Do you have a preference?
This one, I guess.
That one?
He was a newspaper editor and reporter for 30, 35 years, and he just couldn't organize everything, and we were devastated. And the kids love us and embrace us, but it's just, you feel like we're maybe harder to be around at times.
Repeat after me. Apple, table, penny.
Apple. Apple. Red.
Yeah, it's hard, you know, when you've done all those things already, you know, and I felt like I was.
I think he feels like he is letting us down, but he can't help it. No. You know, you're not.
If you include the cost of failures of drug development for Alzheimer's disease and the capitalized cost, that is, what else could you have done with that money, the total cost of developing one Alzheimer's disease drug is $5.6 billion.
No one's ever done this before. Nobody's come up with the medication for Alzheimer's. If it were easy, somebody would have done it a long time ago.
All drugs must pass through 3 clinical phases. Phase 1 is simply getting the drug into a human being without any toxic side effects, oftentimes using different doses to understand how the drug is handled by the body. Does it last? Does it get cleared quickly? Does it get to the target of interest? Phase 2 is when the drug is administered to a small patient population, where it's evaluated if the drug is effective, and where scientists determine what dosage they want to test in patients in a much larger Phase 3 trial. Thousands of people will be tested in order to look at what clinical benefits and data targets are met across the entire patient population.
We collect data from any given patient at multiple time points, at multiple ways to ask questions about that patient's safety or how the patient is feeling.
We're participating in a study. We don't know if he's taking a placebo or a half or a full dose of the drug, but we're doing something. We meet with like 4 different people. They're all wonderful.
Oh, yeah,
You
they
know,
are.
we
It's
spend
great.
3 to 4 hours here.
One of the things that I always have problems with is I'll be reading a book or something like that, and then all of a sudden it just kind of stops, you know, or and then I have to try to get it. I know it's there, but I can't get it.
I think we've been treating the disease at the wrong stage. I really can't think of a disease where if we wait until people come to their doctor saying something's wrong, that we have a better chance of treating them, because the Alzheimer's disease has been building up for 20 years before people get symptoms. It's a long, slow process. We hope that we can bend the curve just enough that people can die out ballroom dancing instead of in a nursing home. You know, this robs wonderful people their deserved end of life. But especially, we don't see the other victims, the family members who take care of them. This affects the whole family, all generations.
So it's pretty clear that people who have the biological changes of Alzheimer's disease in the brain and mild cognitive impairment are at significantly increased risk to develop dementia over the short term and are ideal candidates for clinical trials. But we need to better understand how that part of the diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment, learning whether Alzheimer's disease is the underpinning cause of those cognitive problems, impacts people's decisions about enrolling in a clinical trial. In the study funded by the Bright Focus Foundation, we're really trying to understand how people view these decisions and clinical trials, as well as the interactions between some of the things that are involved in making that decision to participate in a trial. We know that people have burden associated with being in the study. We know that some people want biomarker information and others are reticent to receive it. We know that some people want access to better therapies and others are afraid of drug side effects. So we're taking a comprehensive approach to try to understand each of these aspects and the potential interactions between them so that we can better design clinical trials that people want to be enrolled in, as well as design interventions to help people get over the hump and say, yes, I'm willing to join you in this important scientific effort. Families are desperate for better therapies for Alzheimer's disease, and researchers are desperate for better therapies for Alzheimer's disease as well. And the single most controllable variable in doing clinical trials and accelerating drug development is actually the time it takes to recruit a full sample. Oftentimes, clinical trials take 2 or 3 times as long to recruit as is the length of exposure to the treatment. And so if we could cut the time to recruit to a clinical trial in half, we could cut the total time of conducting that clinical trial by 1/3. And so we really believe that getting more scientific, more aggressive, and having better information to guide our efforts to recruit to studies could literally accelerate the drug development pipeline for Alzheimer's disease. It's absolutely critical that we do a better job of enrolling people in clinical trials who better represent our diverse nation. One study that examined more than 10 years of clinical trials for Alzheimer's disease found that more than 90% of participants were non-Hispanic whites. So that gives us 10% of everyone else in the country, which is woefully inadequate. And we know that this is more important than ever. Without adequate representation in clinical trials, we won't know whether differences in drug safety or even efficacy exist based on any of those parameters. We're very excited about the opportunity that the Bright Focus Foundation funding presented for us to really delve into MCI as an area of study and try to elucidate these important factors in what patients and families are experiencing and how it impacts their decision-making around clinical trials, And we believe that this is going to give us important insights to bring back to our field and our colleagues about how we design these clinical trials and how we go about recruiting them, and hopefully really make an impact on the overarching field and help us get better at getting these trials done all the faster. We're asking new questions, we're testing new treatments, we've identified new targets, and there's a lot of work that's happening now that is going to take us the next step and the step after that. So I am absolutely 100% incredibly hopeful and excited to see what lies ahead for us as a field, because I believe we are on the cusp of changing the way we think about Alzheimer's disease.
Well, and I sometimes, I don't know if it's because I've been around DAF for so long, I'll be at work and I forget how to spell something and I'm like...
But you remembered that you forgot.
Yes.
That's the difference.
Well, and I think we all have little, but you become real sensitive to that, like, is my brain going?
It's about twice the likelihood of having Alzheimer's if you're a woman compared to a man with that same genetic risk factor. And then the other reason women should be very active in this field is we're 4 times as likely to be a caregiver of an Alzheimer's patient. This is a real women's issue, and there's been a lot of recognition of that, but I think we need women in academics to be taking more leadership roles.
So the general thought was that women live longer and so therefore more likely to get Alzheimer's, but recent research suggests that there are some biological influences, hormonal and other influences that might increase the risk. We do know that African Americans have Alzheimer's twice more than whites, and that Hispanics have it 1.5 times more than whites. We have to find out, are there more genetic influences that make these groups more susceptible than others, and are there environmental influences? African Americans have historically been reticent to participate in clinical trials and research studies. Anytime we exclude individuals for any reason as a group, it's disturbing. Americans are Americans, and people are people. And so when it comes to research and it comes to medicine, we need to certainly make sure that we are inclusive.
So I think this already tells us something about your other data. It's really cool.
We're doing a little bit of follow-up, but it does seem like that effect is sticking around.
Awesome. All right, can I ask you to tell us a little bit about personally your motivation for Alzheimer's disease research and joining our group?
Yeah, actually, I've got a really kind of an unusual story of why I came into Alzheimer's research. A lot of people usually assume that I have like a grandparent or a parent or somebody who has Alzheimer's disease. And while that's true, nobody was diagnosed until after I was in graduate school. It felt very morally wrong that you can have an individual who survives everything this world has thrown at you, and you can get to 70 years old or 80 years old and then have all of that taken from you. You know, that knowledge of who you are and what you've done and that connection to your family and those memories, it really seems like there's no greater injustice.
My hope is to come up with quantitative ways to detect Alzheimer's disease earlier and to make sure that those methods of detection are effective for everybody, no matter what their skin color is and no matter what their background is. The reality is that if African Americans don't join the fight in curing things like Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's or diabetes or heart disease, if they're not part of those treatment cohorts, then we won't know if a cure is effective for these groups. While I understand and I sympathize and I agree that many people should feel anger and betrayed, both from historical abuses and current barriers to access, what we need to do is we need to take that anger and that frustration and direct it toward the problems, towards reducing these barriers, and the only way to do that is to work hand in hand with the researchers who are conducting these studies.
The good thing is that there's so many absolutely wonderful studies going on all around the globe. I'm so optimistic. This country certainly is in high gear with absolutely extraordinary types of studies. I do think there will be a cure.
Huge sums are spent each year to make a better product to sell for less.
Our job is to work with the scientific community to make sure that the products do what they claim to do, that this is a drug that will benefit patients. Too many diseases still await treatments and cures. Serious public health needs, such as treatments for Alzheimer's disease, are not being met. When I was FDA commissioner, I would sometimes hear accusations that it must be the bureaucratic FDA that was slowing down progress and standing in the way of new, better drugs getting to people suffering from Alzheimer's. My mother is currently suffering from dementia. She's now 92. And in recent years, you know, she's become but a shell of her former self. And she was a very accomplished, determined woman who broke barriers as the first African-American woman to be admitted to Vassar College and the first African-American woman to go to Yale Medical School. She was a professor at Stanford and Harvard. She was a member of the National Academy of Medicine, but, you know.
She must be very proud of you.
She is very proud. She is very proud, although sadly, occasionally she forgets that she's my mother. I have to remind her sometimes, but she's very proud of me. Watching my mom and her Alzheimer's has obviously been very, very poignant, very, very hard for all of us. But there are these moments that are just delightful. And at Christmas time, our whole family was there. I have 2 kids, a son and a daughter. And we were opening presents, and I gave her a sweater, and she would open it and say, "This is wonderful, I just love it. Thank you so much. I'm really gonna cherish it and wear it all the time." And she would neatly package it back up in its wrappings. And a few minutes later, she'd open it again, and she'd say, "Oh, who gave me this sweater? I just love it." And this kept happening all throughout the course of the evening. And my son said, you know, one great thing about dementia is that you can experience the joyful things in life over and over again. I wish that that was, you know, the hallmark of dementia, because of course, there's so many things where it isn't the joyful parts of life. It's the sadness. It's seeing a person you know and love disappear before you.
African Americans have 2 times the risk of developing dementia compared to white Americans. And so that goes for the incidence, which means how many people will develop it over time, and also the prevalence, which is like taking a snapshot of our population right now and finding out how many people have a disease.
There are many risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. Some of them are genetic and some of them are environmental. It's well known that African Americans see disparities in many of the environmental risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. And these mainly involve cardiovascular conditions.
The research that we're doing that was funded by the Bright Focus Foundation is examining the effect of physical activity on cognitive function in older African American adults.
What I would like to do is get to a state where we have specialized or tailored treatment recommendations or prevention recommendations based on someone's unique characteristics.
We know that African Americans do not participate in aging research as much as people from other ethnic groups. And so what we want from this project really was we wanted to basically have a start, a pilot project that would show the effects of physical activity on cognition. We just don't have enough information on the effect of behavioral interventions on African Americans. A lot of studies have been done in the United States, and a lot of the majority of those people who are in those studies are not African American. And we know that there are some differences in terms of some of the factors that put you at risk for Alzheimer's disease and dementia. So hypertension, diabetes, but then also genetic factors like ApoE and telomeres. And so when you have these differences and you don't know how behavioral studies are going to affect these things, that's why there's a need for more studies being done in African Americans.
The Bright Focus Foundation grant gave us the first step that we needed to understand that we should develop a playbook for recruiting African American adults into clinical research studies. The reason why this worked at all is because of Robert's skill in that area and the fact that we were able to form a partnership that put his community engagement knowledge together with my Alzheimer knowledge.
What we're hoping that this will result in is, a stronger message that by engaging in regular physical activity, that you can delay the onset of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. If you can have a few more years of a non-demented state and having all of your cognitive faculties, that's really what we would like to be able to promote.
I get to go to sleep every night and sleep soundly because at least I am trying to reduce human suffering in some way, whether I'm successful or not. And I just think that is an amazing privilege to be granted.
I am very hopeful, and that hope is what fuels my interest in this field and my drive and the grants that we're going after and the population that we're working with. It is that hope that we can really make an impact on this on a very large scale.
I, as you probably know, hate things that I can't control. And this virus, this pandemic has been, just incredible in that you feel completely that you have no control over the situation. And the A4 study and our prevention trials have had all these roller coasters. So I have to admit it's been stressful, no question.
I think in the face of COVID-19, the conversations I've heard now is scientists are our heroes. We're counting on the scientists.
One of the things that really has buoyed me is talking to some participants who've reminded us that finding a treatment for Alzheimer's disease is also essential work. And therefore, no matter what, we have to find a way to keep going. COVID actually has taught us to be able to do remote assessments, questionnaires, you can do even cognitive tests on your smartphone. I am excited that our ability to kind of look at in new trials will be even more sensitive. So we can go earlier, we can go faster, and this gives me hope that we're gonna solve it.
To me, it's way more than one trial. Now it's a global struggle against Alzheimer's.
Drugs are being developed that attack the tau proteins in the brain, and researchers are exploring stem cell therapies. They're also boosting the energy output of cells that are experiencing a kind of power failure earlier in the disease. And a team at MIT has successfully reduced amyloid plaques using LED lights that stimulate gamma brain waves. Scientists are very focused now on developing new blood tests for Alzheimer's disease that could make early detection and diagnosis simpler, quicker, more affordable, and more widely available.
One of the hopeful things is that tau PET imaging is looking very promising. So to me, that's very exciting because I think we're gonna have more ability to be able to tell more quickly whether a drug is really changing the course of the disease in the brain.
One of the really fun projects that I got to work on, we were looking to see if you could design a device that would allow consumers to take over a little bit more of their brain health. So if you think about it today, we're all wearing these devices that track our steps, they track our heart rate. What's really interesting is they can track a lot of other things that actually might give you some insight into your cognitive health. The field is just taking off in these digital detection devices. And these are things that could tell you, something has changed for you. You might want to talk with your doctor.
They say we stand on the shoulders of giants who've come before you. That's a paraphrase quote from Isaac Newton. But what that's missing is you're standing on the shoulders of everyone, not just the giants. You're standing on the shoulders of people who had researched dead ends.
It wasn't Apollo 1 that landed on the moon. It was Apollo 11. Apollo 1, we actually lost 3 astronauts in a fire. For the field of Alzheimer's, where we are right now, maybe we're at kind of Apollo 6 or 7 or 8. We don't know when we're going to have Apollo 11.
You think about the progress in human physiology. We had to learn about the circulatory system, the endocrine system. One of the latest systems of the human body we came to understand was the nervous system. Why? Because that also involves electricity. And electricity had to be developed and understood first. I lay awake at night wondering what system of our world that to us is just mysterious, awaiting the arrival of a clever person that'll bring it all together. Just because we think the brain is more complex than the universe itself doesn't mean it is. It just doesn't feel that way yet.
This is the final frontier in medicine.
Let's kill it.
Research that I'm doing that's been funded by the Bright Focus Foundation focuses on the circuitry of memory in Alzheimer's disease at early stages. Specifically, I'm looking at the role of a particular brain area called the thalamus and its influence on memory in Alzheimer's disease. At the very earliest stages of Alzheimer's disease, the disease itself, meaning amyloid plaques and tau-based tangles, tend to form in the entorhinal cortex. In the next stage, they appear in the hippocampus. And the problem arises that these pathologies, amyloid and tau, essentially disrupt the communication between these two regions. A lot of research in this area has focused on the damage in the brain of Alzheimer's patients. What we're looking at is how to actually enhance what's there or what's left so that people's memory can work better than it is. So our hypothesis is perhaps the communication between the thalamus and the hippocampus is preserved or less damaged. If our hypothesis is true, that the communication between the thalamus and hippocampus is either preserved or only minimally damaged, we can use that information to develop devices, medicines, or even cognitive therapies that harness that somewhat more intact circuitry and overcome the dysfunction of the entorhinal pathway to hippocampus. Innovation is so important for Alzheimer's research because there's a lot at stake. This is a growing problem exponentially. There are a lot of patients and families that are waiting for new treatments and new therapies. I also feel that it's not going to be just one magic therapy that's going to work. It's really going to take a lot of out-of-the-box ideas and a lot of different ideas to help our patients. The funding from Bright Focus has been really important because this is a new direction in our lab. Our lab is primarily focused on the communication between entorhinal cortex and hippocampus. And as we dug deeper in this question, this concept of the thalamus inputs to hippocampus came up. However, we didn't have preliminary data to apply for federal grants and so on and so forth. And so Bright Focus Foundation is sort of giving us the opportunity to take some risk and try some new creative ideas that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to work on. This project on the thalamus is going to progress as follows. I think the first step is to get basic information on how these different brain structures, thalamus and hippocampus, communicate with each other, and how does it go awry in Alzheimer's disease. And then we hope in short order that we could then move to a clinical trial with human patients in the coming years, where we can use this information and test actual therapies to enhance memory. My main motivation really derives from my patients. While I spend a lot of time on research, I also take care of patients in my practice who have memory disorders, including Alzheimer's disease. And they are always asking me about what we're doing in the lab, what's the progress, what's happening with clinical trials. I think this is the best time to be part of Alzheimer's research. We are going to come up with new treatments and new therapies. So this is a very exciting time to be in Alzheimer's disease research.
Thank you for watching this sampling from Turning Point. We hope you enjoyed the clips, the interviews with these dedicated and inspiring scientists, and the stories of hope from the front line. There are many more stories of hope in the full film. If you would like to help support Bright Focus research, please make a donation today through the links on this page. Thank you, Tanya, for joining me today on this very important conversation.
Thank you, Tricia. It's been an honor to be a part of this. We've got a lot of work to do.
That we do. And thank you all for joining us today.